If you really want to get a handle on, you know, the terrifying reality of absolute power, sometimes the best way is to look at the people who got closest to it and then just vanished.
Exactly. It's about proximity and peril.
So let's paint a picture.
Mm-hmm.
It's late 2013. Imagine Pyongyang, the air is just biting cold, this heavy winter settling in. And inside one of those stark, broodless security buildings, a man is sitting alone.
Waiting.
He looks calm, restrained, thin metal glasses. This is Jang Song-Thaek.
And Jang Song-Thaek wasn't just some high-level official having a bad day. His disappearance, well, it was seismic, an earthquake within the regime.
Because he'd been the insider for decades, hadn't he? The undisputed #2.
Absolutely, and crucially, married right into the dynasty. He was the husband of Kim Jong-il's only sister, Kim Kyung-hui. He wasn't just near power, he was connected to its source by marriage.
The ultimate power broker, the quiet face, the guy who actually ran the machinery of the country for years and years.
Making the trains run on time, so to speak, in a system that's fundamentally broken.
And the irony, it's just crushing when you think about it. Here's a man who literally managed ministries, oversaw agriculture, energy, foreign policy.
The guy who kept the lights on?
Right. The man who basically stabilized the entire state after Kim Jong-il died. And ends up reduced to nothing, a political zero, isolated in some cold, concrete hallway.
And that moment, his fall, it did way more than just end one powerful life. It really signaled the start of what analysts, I think correctly, called the largest political purge of the 21st century.
Wow, the largest.
Yeah, this wasn't just about removing Jang. It was a full-scale, violent eradication. His whole network, political, economic, even family ties, gone.
And their crime. What was the official line? Or the real reason?
The real reason. Being perceived as too close to the sun, having the potential capacity to challenge or even replace the leader, that was unforgivable.
Okay. So let's get into this. We're going to do a deep dive today using the sources we have, intelligence reports, defector accounts, maybe some internal whispers to trace this story.
Yeah, his unprecedented rise, this fatal conflict that brewed, and then the complete obliteration of him and everyone associated with him.
And the goal here isn't just recounting a dramatic story, right? It's about understanding the mechanics, the cold, terrifying mechanics of how power gets consolidated, how transitions happen in the Kim dynasty.
Precisely. It's a profound lesson, really. A necessary historical lesson about what happens when you orbit too close to absolute authority. The price is non-negotiable. You know, for a very long time, if you asked anyone who followed North Korea closely, analysts, diplomats, even high-ranking officials inside Pyongyang who really mattered, besides the leader,
the answer was always Jang Song-Thaek.
Instantly, Jang Song-Thaek. But what made him so unique, so powerful, was how he got there. It wasn't the usual path.
How so? He wasn't military, was he? Or from one of the founding families?
No, exactly. He came from a working-class background, not the military elite, not the old guard revolutionaries. His ascent was purely down to, well, ruthless political intelligence.
Just smarts and ambition.
And an incredible knack for organization. He was seen as hyper-capable, focused, the guy who could actually make things work in that incredibly dysfunctional state. He made himself indispensable.
But even with all that skill, that political savvy, the marriage was the game changer, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Marrying Kim Kyung-hui, Kim Il-sung's only daughter, Kim Jong-il's only sister. That was his golden ticket. It gave him immediate, almost untouchable political protection.
It put him right inside the PAC-2 bloodline orbit, even if he wasn't blood himself.
Exactly. He was family by marriage. That opened every door.
But okay, the marriage gets him in the door. His actual power, though, the kind of deep, pervasive influence that eventually, ironically, got him killed, that was built on something more tangible, right? Institutional control.
Yes. He didn't just advise on the economy, he controlled the levers. We're talking the national treasury, the state's, let's call them alternative finances.
Let's zero in on those levers, because that's where the real power often lies in these systems. When you say he oversaw the economy,
we're talking specifically about managing foreign trade, which is the lifeline. And crucially, Office 39.
Ah, Office 39. The legendary black box.
Pretty much. This super secretive organization, directly under his control for a long time, handles the Kim family's personal slush funds. We're talking illicit activities, alleged drug trafficking, counterfeiting, selling resources off the books, anything to generate hard currency for the leadership.
So controlling Office 39 meant he didn't just manage the official state budget.
He managed the leader's personal bank account. The luxury goods, the cognac, the Mercedes. That pipeline ran through Jane.
Wow. That gives him unbelievable leverage, doesn't it, over the loyalty of the entire elite.
Absolutely. If a general needed off-budget funds, if a party official needed access to foreign currency for, projects, they had to go through Jang. He became the central node. Money, resources, trade, it all flowed through him.
So he's not just a bureaucrat. He's the guy handing out the favors, the patronage, the central nervous system of that whole network.
Precisely. And beyond the money, which was huge, the sources always highlight his control over critical domestic stuff, too. Agriculture, energy, resource management, things you need to keep the country, basically functioning and prevent collapse.
And externally,
Yeah.
his role with China seems absolutely pivotal.
Hugely pivotal. It was widely understood, both in Pyongyang and, importantly, in Beijing, that if China wanted to talk serious policy or work out major trade deals,
They talked to Jang.
they went through Jang Song-Thaek. He'd spent decades cultivating personal relationships with senior Chinese Communist Party figures. This wasn't just executing policy handed down from Kim Jong-il. He was shaping the relationship. He was seen as the guy charting the course for economic modernization, the link to the outside world.
And his persona. How did he carry himself amidst all this power? Very controlled. The descriptions are consistent, calm, neat, restrained, often emotionless in public, usually standing, a few respectful steps behind the leader. So, not flamboyant.
No, not at all. It wasn't shyness. It was calculated. He avoided the theatrical stuff you saw from some generals or party ideologues. His appearance masked this incredibly sharp mind, constantly calculating, constantly, as one source put it, planning for survival.
Because you had to in that environment.
You absolutely had to. Paranoia is the currency of the realm there. His ability to seem professional, indispensable, yet subtly restrained. That's how he amassed power for so long without triggering alarms. Initially, it was a masterclass in political survival.
But as we know, even the best planning eventually ran into the ultimate immovable object.
The leader himself, yeah. His very success became his undoing.
So all this power, this carefully built structure Jang commanded, it all faced this massive test in December 2011.
Right. The death of Kim Jong-il, the dear leader. That winter was dark, heavy, uncertain.
And the official story, we all remember it, died of heart attack, working tirelessly for the people on his train.
Yeah, the classic propaganda narrative. But the political reality, as usual, was much, much murkier.
There were those unofficial reports, weren't there? Whispers that he might have actually died days earlier than they announced.
Exactly. Suggesting a period where the military, the high command, they were scrambling behind the scenes, frantically debating, coordinating what was an incredibly volatile succession plan.
So it wasn't just a leader dying. It was an immediate, potentially catastrophic political crisis. A power vacuum opening up, a terrifying vacuum. And into that void steps the designated heir, Kim Jong-Un, 27 years old. Basically a kid in political terms, inexperienced, untested by actual governance or the military, largely an unknown quantity, even to his own senior officials.
Yeah, and the image the outside world had wasn't exactly reassuring, was it? Those old school photos kept surfacing, the chubby kid in Switzerland wearing Western clothes, maybe a poster of Michael Jordan in the background.
Right. He was seen, probably accurately, as radically unprepared for the job of supreme leader in one of the world's most brutal regimes.
And it's because of that instantaneous vulnerability that sense the whole thing could just fall apart. That's why everyone's eyes immediately turned to Jang Song-Thaek.
He was the anchor, the indispensable man in that moment.
He had to be. He was the elder statesman, the uncle, the guy who'd worked side by side with the father for decades. He had the institutional memory, the political connections.
And crucially, the economic control. He could keep the lights on and kept the elite paid during this incredibly shaky transition.
Right. He wasn't just stabilizing the transfer, he was essentially acting as a kind of political regent, whether formally or informally. And the consensus at the time, even among skeptical analysts outside North Korea, was basically, okay, as long as Jang Song-Thaek is there, the country probably won't collapse. Yeah, the country is safe. Safe from internal chaos, safe from military factions tearing each other apart, safe from a total power struggle. He was seen as the essential guarantor of stability. His job was to hand over a functioning state to his young nephew.
And outwardly, that's the role he seemed to play.
He did. But here's where it gets complex, and where you start to see the seeds of the future conflict. Some observers, maybe naively, believed Jang was acting purely out of loyalty. Loyalty to the Kim dynasty, committed to preserving his brother-in-law's legacy and ensuring the next generation took over smoothly.
But was he? I mean, given the immense personal power he already wielded controlling the money, the patronage networks, Is it really plausible that a rivalry wasn't brewing almost immediately, even as he was playing the role of stabilizer? The tension had to be there from day one. Think about it. A young, insecure dictator inherits absolute power. He fundamentally cannot tolerate a safety net that seems stronger, more indispensable than he is. The stabilizer becomes the threat.
Precisely. Kim Jong-un surely recognized that his own power was largely nominal, symbolic, until he could dismantle the very structure that made his uncle essential. The stability Jang provided was, paradoxically, the single greatest obstacle to Kim Jong-un establishing his own personal absolute authority.
So the transition was stabilized, yes, but the underlying political balance was inherently unstable, tilted towards the uncle.
Always precarious. Tilted towards the uncle's practical power. And the sources we have from that immediate post-2011 period, they suggest Kim Jong-un started his rule deeply insecure. Understandably so.
He needed to project strength, decisiveness, be seen as the sole leader.
Exactly. And Jang's huge shadow, his reputation, his actual control, it simply didn't allow that image to fully form. From the moment Kim Jong-un took power, you could argue Jang's fate wasn't really about what he did anymore. It was about the fact that he existed with so much power.
So fast forward a bit into 2012, 2013. If you were watching Pyongyang closely, this split, this political schism,
Yeah.
it wasn't some hidden secret, was it?
Not at all. It was becoming an open secret among the elite, and even to outside observers paying close attention. You essentially had a parallel government operating.
Two competing power structures.
Yeah, often pulling economic policy, maybe even political appointments in different directions. And that kind of dynamic, it's just fundamentally incompatible with a totalitarian state built around the absolute singular will of the leader.
So you have Kim Jong-un as the official face, the propaganda image, the constitutional ruler.
But Jang Song-Thaek was, in many practical ways, the actual functional leader of the system. He was the one, as we said, making the trains run on time, keeping the money flowing.
And when the official power holder starts looking like a figurehead,
He has no choice but to eliminate the source of that perception, its survival.
okay, let's dig into the specific evidence from the sources. How did Jang's real day-to-day power manifest in ways that clearly undermined the young leader?
Well, the examples are pretty concrete and revealing. In high-level central government meetings, reports indicate he wasn't just advising, he was often the primary decision-maker.
Overriding others.
Yeah, overriding younger officials, sometimes even pushing back against policy directions favored by Kim Jong-un's own immediate circle. And perhaps even more damningly, you had military generals.
Who were notoriously loyal only to the supreme commander.
Exactly. But they were consistently obeying Jang. Why? Because he controlled their access to foreign funds and resources via Office 39. He held the purse strings for their projects, their perks.
Money talks, even in Pyongyang's military.
It certainly seems so, but maybe the most telling signal of this parallel structure was just the basic protocol, the optics.
What do you mean?
Defector accounts and internal reports consistently mention that ministers, senior officials, they would visit Jang's office first before going to see the young leader.
Wow. So Jang was the gatekeeper, the filter.
Effectively, yes. The necessary hub for getting approvals, for coordinating plans, for getting resources allocated. The entire state apparatus seemed to understand that Jang was the one whose signature, whose nod, really mattered for major initiatives.
And this leads us to that critical moment, right? The point where the internal perception becomes explicit, formalized almost. Those internal documents. Ah, yes. The documents that reportedly circulated among the elite, which included the absolutely fatal phrase that Jang could manage the country without the leader's permission. That's just breathtakingly dangerous to have in writing.
It's his death warrant, signed and sealed right there. For Kim Jong-un, reading that, it's not a bureaucratic assessment of his uncle's competence, it's treason. It's a public declaration that the supreme leader is optional, decorative.
A figurehead.
Exactly. And no absolute ruler, especially a young one, desperately trying to cement his legitimacy, can allow that idea to exist, let alone circulate in writing. Whether it was even literally true doesn't matter. The perception that he could act autonomously was the fatal flaw.
So this conflict is simmering, boiling over throughout 2013. What were the intelligence reports picking up? What shifts signaled that the regime was gearing up to make a move against the uncle?
Well, the loudest alarm bells were ringing on the foreign relations front, specifically with China.
His connection there became a liability.
A massive liability. Jang's contacts with Beijing became more frequent, more public, and critically seemed to bypass Kim Jong-un at times. China clearly saw Jang as the predictable, rational figure they could deal with, perhaps in contrast to the young, volatile Kim.
So Beijing was essentially treating Jang as the real leader.
Sources strongly indicate that China was actively meeting with Jiang, sometimes apparently bypassing formal diplomatic channels in Pyongyang, treating him as their primary political and economic partner. This gave Jiang a huge degree of external legitimacy.
Which is incredibly dangerous for Kim Jong-un.
Hugely dangerous. It looked like China, North Korea's essential ally, preferred his uncle over him. That directly undermines his authority on the world stage. When your main backer seems to be dealing with your subordinate as the principal, well, that's an untenable situation for the leader.
And what about domestically? Were there signs of cracks appearing inside North Korea itself?
Yeah, the fissures were becoming visible, particularly in the military and the economic networks Jang controlled. Reports started surfacing, confirming that specific army generals, maybe certain units, harbored personal loyalty primarily to Jang, not necessarily to the young Kim.
That's a critical break in the supposed monolithic unity.
Absolutely. Plus, the major state traders, the guys controlling the flow of exports and imports, the hard currency earners, they worked almost exclusively under Jiang's directions. So he had the money, the foreign contacts, and at least pockets of military support.
A powerful combination. And then you add another layer. Dissatisfaction, apparently, even within some branches of the extended Kim family about Jang's influence. Not just his political power, but sources also mention his somewhat notorious reputation as a playboy, really, contrasting with his controlled public image.
Yeah, rumors of a lavish private life funded, ironically, by the very illicit accounts he managed through Office 39. Now, whether true or exaggerated, this provided perfect ammunition for Kim Jong-un's faction.
Ah, so they could frame the purge not just as political consolidation, but as cleaning house, getting rid of corrupt elements.
Exactly. It adds a veneer of moral justification. We're not just removing a rival, we're purging corruption and decadence. So putting it all together, Jang had effectively built this parallel state, an economic engine, foreign backing, some military loyalty that was running arguably more efficiently than the official government structure under Kim Jong-un. That sounds less like a potential threat and more like a ticking time bomb. It absolutely was. And this leads to the tipping point. The moment the assessment landed on Kim Jong-un's desk, that changed everything. Reportedly delivered by one of his most trusted security chiefs.
And the language was unambiguous, devastatingly clear. The assessment allegedly stated the flow of power was going towards Jang. If he wanted, he could seize the country without a war.
Without a war, that's the chilling part.
That's the key. It wasn't about a military coup, tanks in the streets. It was about the potential for a soft coup. A political replacement achieved because he controlled the money, the elite networks, the foreign backing. He could just turn off the tap, essentially. Or subtly shift allegiances. The moment Kim Jong-un's own security apparatus confirmed that his uncle possessed the capacity for such a move, regardless of intent, the leader had only one path left to ensure his own survival: total preemptive eradication. The end was inevitable from that point. So the decision is made: eradicate Jang Song-Thaek. But it wasn't just a sudden strike, was it? It followed a pattern, a sort of methodical dismantling.
Yeah, the classic dictator's playbook. When you perceive a major threat like this, you don't necessarily go for the head immediately. You first isolate them, dismantle their support structure, cut off their resources. You destroy the ground they stand on.
Okay, so what was target number one in this phased hunt?
His immediate inner circle, the people running his day-to-day operations, managing his communications, his finances. Sources detail several of his close deputies just disappearing.
Vanishing without explanation.
Exactly. These weren't low-level aides. These were the key managers, the ones who knew where the bodies were buried, so to speak, or at least where the money was hidden. Taking them out strategically isolated Jang, cutting off his eyes and ears.
And then the next step, perhaps even more chilling, targeting his physical security.
Yes. That was step 2, and a very loud signal. 3 of Jang's main personal bodyguards were arrested and disappeared. Now, in a security state like North Korea, when they arrest a top official's own guards,
That means he's marked, unprotected.
it's the official signal, the noose is tightening, it tells the target and everyone else that the supreme leader's security forces can reach him anywhere, anytime. His personal protection is meaningless.
A deliberate psychological blow.
Absolutely. And then the restrictions started. Jang suddenly found his access to certain key military sectors blocked. Political meetings he typically chaired were abruptly canceled or postponed indefinitely.
And the media. The propaganda machine started turning against him, subtly at first.
Classic North Korean strategy. First, erase them from the media, then erase them from the world. References to his name in state news reports began to dwindle. Fewer photos of him alongside the leader.
He starts becoming an unperson.
Systematically, it's psychological warfare, conditioning the elite and the public for his eventual final removal. By the time the final blow falls, people have already subconsciously registered his diminishing presence, his non-existence almost.
And all these steps, this careful isolation and erasure, they all led up to that one decisive, incredibly public moment.
The session of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party, December 9th, 2013. This wasn't meant to be quiet. This was pure political theater designed to crush any lingering idea that anyone could rival Kim Jong-Un.
Set the scene for us. What was the atmosphere like in that hall?
Imagine this grand room filled with the absolute top brass generals, dripping with medals, powerful party secretaries, government ministers, everyone who mattered. And the silence, according to accounts, was unnatural, heavy. Everyone knew something big, something unprecedented was about to happen. Kim Jong-un is there, seated, observing his court.
And then the doors open.
And two security officers walk in, dressed in plain, nondescript khaki uniforms. Their very presence in that room during a Central Committee meeting was shocking. Security normally stays outside that inner sanctum.
And they head straight for Jang.
Silent, focused. They walk directly towards Jang Song-Thaek.
His reaction, was it fear? Defiance?
The accounts suggest something interesting. His eyes widened, yes, but apparently more astonishment, surprise.
Surprised that it would happen like this, so publicly.
Perhaps, maybe he expected a quiet retirement, a purge behind closed doors, not this blatant, brutal humiliation in front of the entire leadership he'd served alongside for decades. Surprised that the regime he helped stabilize would turn on him so openly, so degradingly.
And the arrest itself was designed for maximum impact.
Maximum degradation. They didn't just ask him to come with them. They grabbed his arms, his shoulders, and physically lifted him out of his seat. Dragged him from the room like a common criminal, like a petty enemy, as one description put it.
No dignity allowed. Removed like an object.
Exactly. In front of everyone. His peers, his rivals. Everyone saw the former number 2 hauled away like that. It must have been paralyzing for those watching.
And Kim Jong-un just watches.
Reportedly impassive, just observing his uncle, the man who arguably secured his succession, being publicly shamed and broken. It was the ultimate demonstration of his absolute power. But the message wasn't just for those in the room, was it?
No, because they broadcast it.
They put footage of this humiliating arrest on state television for the whole country, the whole world to see.
That is just chilling. The message couldn't be clearer.
Unequivocal. In this country, no one is above the ruler. Not your experience, not your history, not your economic power, not even your family connection to the founder. All loyalty, all power flows only from Kim Jong-un. Period. So after that incredibly public takedown, Jang Song-Thaek disappears into the regime's internal security apparatus. The interrogation phase kicks in immediately.
And the conditions, based on what we know about that system, grim, extremely grim. The sources describe the standard procedure. Cold, damp, windowless concrete cells. Environments explicitly designed to break a person's will, physically and psychologically. The security unit handling him would have been chosen for its ruthlessness. And the goal wasn't necessarily truth, but confession.
The goal was almost certainly to extract a confession, likely pre-written, that could be televised or published to justify the execution they had already decided on.
So the formal charges that eventually emerged, they were tailored for that purpose.
Absolutely. A mix of plausible accusations and pure political heresy, designed to paint him as the ultimate traitor, justifying the ultimate punishment.
What were the main charges listed? Well, you had the big one, attempted coup d'etat. Then the standard accusations used in purges. Economic sabotage, corruption, mismanaging state finances, and significantly, illegal domination of the power structure, basically being a shadow leader, acting above his station.
Right. But some of the other charges are even more revealing about Kim Jong-un's specific anxieties. He was formally charged with having close relations with China.
So confirming our analysis that Beijing's preference for him was seen as treasonous.
Exactly. And then there was the charge of having a royal demeanor or royal behavior.
Meaning what? He acted like he was part of the ruling family.
Essentially, yes, acting as if he had an inherent right to power, a status equal to the Kim bloodline, which, in Kim Jong-un's eyes, he absolutely did not. It was about challenging the unique legitimacy of the ruling family.
All this leads up to the trial, which was swift.
Astonishingly swift. The military tribunal took place on December 12, 2013, just 3 days after his public arrest. This wasn't justice. It was political theater staged to look like justice.
3 days. for a coup trial.
Yeah, it underscores the predetermined outcome. The entire official session, held in some large, cold room, presided over by 3 military judges. It lasted only 22 minutes.
22 minutes. Start to finish.
Start to finish. There was zero due process. Jang had no lawyer, no opportunity to present a defense, no right to object to the charges or the evidence, whatever that might have been.
So the judges just read the verdict. They read the charges, declared him guilty, and read the predetermined sentence. Death for great treason, enmity to the party, and trying to overthrow the government. The sheer speed, the 22-minute duration, communicated the trial's real purpose. It was just a formality, a rubber stamp on the execution order already given by the leader. And then the execution itself, this is where things get murky, right? Conflicting reports, rumors, all seemingly part of the regime strategy.
Deliberately murky, designed to maximize fear and project an image of extreme, unpredictable cruelty. The official North Korean version, the one fed to their own people in any friendly states, was sanitized.
What did they claim?
Execution by ordinary firearm. Sounds almost routine, clinical.
But that wasn't the story intelligence agencies picked up. No. South Korean intelligence and other diplomatic sources very quickly circulated a much more brutal narrative. Execution using a 14.5mm anti-aircraft machine gun.
Yeah.
An anti-aircraft gun on a person.
Yeah, and the difference isn't just the weapon, it's the political message. An anti-aircraft gun is used to obliterate heavily fortified targets, tanks, aircraft. Using it on a human being sends a message about the sheer scale of the threat Jang was perceived to be.
It implies not just killing, but annihilation.
Obliteration.
Physical erasure,
Yeah.
exactly. But then we also have to address that other rumor, the one that went viral globally, even though it was later widely debunked.
The story about the dogs.
Yeah, the incredibly lurid story that he was stripped naked and fed to or attacked by 70 hungry wild dogs.
Which sounds like something out of a medieval horror story. It does, and the fact that major media outlets and a significant portion of the global public were actually willing to believe that story, that tells you something profound about the image North Korea had successfully cultivated.
That the world saw them as capable of literally anything, no matter how barbaric.
Precisely. Even if the dog story was false, the fact that it was believable served the regime's purpose. It amplified the fear, cemented Kim Jong-un's reputation as utterly ruthless, perhaps the most ruthless leader on the planet at that time.
So, regardless of the specific gruesome method, the end result was the same.
Total and absolute. Nobody was ever returned or acknowledged. No grave exists, no official marker. Jang Song-Thaek was gone. When this regime purges someone at that level, the goal is complete eradication, body, name, memory, history. Wiped clean. And in North Korea, especially under the Kims, purging the individual is never enough. Not when the perceived threat is that significant.
You have to purge the network, the clan.
Exactly. It's collective punishment, institutionalized as a tool of state security. To eliminate the threat completely, you have to rip out its roots, the entire political, economic, and critically familial network associated with the target. Jang's execution was the starting gun for a much wider, much quieter massacre.
And the first person inevitably caught in that ripple effect was his wife, right? Kim Jong-un's own aunt.
Yes, the only surviving full sister of Kim Jong-il, a powerful figure in her own right, holding senior party titles for years.
What happened to her? The sources are a bit unclear, aren't they?
They are. The consensus from reports and defector accounts suggests she was immediately confined to her home after Jang's arrest. Rumors circulated widely that she was in a kind of semi-conscious state, perhaps heavily sedated or given tranquilizers.
Essentially exiled from reality as well as from power.
That seems to be the picture. The key detail, noted in several sources, is that Kim Jong-un reportedly never met with her again after her husband's execution. She was politically dead, even if physically alive, left to fade away quietly, neutralized without a public execution.
But the purge spread much wider than just his wife. You mentioned the scale.
The scale is staggering, and it really illustrates just how deep Jang's influence ran, and therefore how deep Kim Jong-un's fear must have been. We're talking over 300 people targeted in the immediate aftermath.
300. Who were these people?
It was a cross-section of his entire power base. Military officials known to be loyal to him, economic managers who ran the trade routes and controlled the foreign currency under his direction, foreign affairs specialists, particularly those involved in the China relationship.
So key functionaries.
Yes, but it went further. In-laws, extended family members. And perhaps most chillingly, reports indicate the purge included people who only knew him, individuals who worked in departments associated with him, or had tangential connections.
Just knowing him could be a death sentence, or at least lead to arrest or the labor camps. It underscores the regime's obsession with eliminating not just the person, but all institutional memory associated with them. The message to the entire elite was terrifying. Any connection, however slight, to a fallen official makes you toxic, potentially fatally so, and the speed of this broader purge.
Astonishingly fast. This wasn't a slow grinding process. The entire operation, the systematic arrests, the summary executions of key figures, the sentencing of hundreds of others to the brutal political prison camps, it was largely completed in less than 3 months.
3 months to wipe out a network built over decades.
A network that essentially propped up the state's finances and foreign relations, gone, wiped off the map by the young leader in a single, brutal quarter.
How did Pyongyang itself react? You can't just disappear 300 powerful people without creating tremors. What were the signs on the ground?
Reports from that time suggest the city felt different. Palpably colder, quieter, more tense than usual. People sensed a major, earth-shattering political event had happened, even if the state media narrative was vague.
What were they saying publicly?
Just generalized stuff about cleaning out corrupt elements, rooting out anti-party, counter-revolutionary factionalists, standard purge language. But everyone in the elite knew exactly who the target was, and the fear was palpable. If the untouchable Jang could fall like that, nobody was safe. And the most visible sign, at least for those who look closely at the regime's output, the manipulation of history in real time.
The photoshopping.
Exactly. Old group photos featuring Jang standing alongside Kim Jong-il, or even early photos with Kim Jong-un, were meticulously altered, scrubbed clean. In official archives, where Jang once stood, there was suddenly just an empty space, a blur.
Making him literally an unperson in the visual record.
Denying his existence retroactively, it's a core part of the process. Erase the past to control the present and the future. Okay, so we've traced the what and the how. Now let's shift to the why. Why did Kim Jong-un do this? And it's really crucial here, as analysts stress, to look beyond just personal animosity, though that likely played a role.
This was fundamentally a political calculation, wasn't it? About survival and power consolidation.
Cold, calculated political necessity. A move for systemic self-preservation. The sources point to about 4 key analytical reasons why this had to happen from Kim Jong-un's perspective. All right, let's break those down. Reason number 1 seems structural. Jang simply had excessive power. Way too much power. Institutional, economic, security-related power. It wasn't just ceremonial influence. It was functional control over the money, over parts of the military, over the vital foreign trade. He represented a parallel center of gravity.
And in an absolute system, you can only have one center.
Exactly. Yeah. A fatal contradiction. Kim Jong-un had to demonstrate, brutally, that the center of gravity was singular, himself. No rivals allowed. Okay, reason number 2, which we touched on, but was clearly critical, China's perception.
This was a huge red line. Beijing clearly saw Jang as the stable, reliable, pragmatic hand on the tiller in Pyongyang, their preferred interlocutor.
And by dealing with him as such, they basically confirmed Kim Jong-un's worst fear, that he was seen as secondary, maybe even temporary, a figurehead. Kim Jong-un could not afford to have North Korea's most vital ally openly signaling preference for his uncle. The Purge sent a violent message to Beijing to, you deal with me and only me from now on. Makes sense. Reason number 3 goes back to that chilling intelligence assessment. The soft coup threat.
Right. Because Jang controlled the money, the trade routes, potentially had sway over certain military units. He possessed the capability to orchestrate a change in leadership without firing a shot.
Not a military invasion, but a political strangulation. Exactly. Quietly cutting off funds to the central leadership, redirecting resources, using his network within the elite to build consensus for a replacement, perhaps someone seen as more stable or pliable. He had the infrastructure to potentially replace the leader through control and consensus. That capacity alone, whether he intended to use it or not, was an unforgivable threat. And the 4th reason, this one feels deeply rooted in the dynasty's own history. Bloody stabilization. Yeah, this puts it in historical context. There's a pattern here. Every Kim leader arguably has needed a great sacrifice early in their rule. A major purge to demonstrate their ruthlessness, consolidate control, and terrify the elite into absolute obedience.
Like Kim Il-sung purging his early rivals.
Right, like Park Han-young. And Kim Jong-il had his own purges of generals and party officials after he fully took over. Jang Song-Thaek became the necessary, symbolic, massive sacrifice for Kim Jong-un's era.
A bloody rite of passage, almost. In a way. A declaration. I am as ruthless, maybe even more ruthless than my father and grandfather. Therefore, I am worthy of this throne. Fear me.
How did the rest of the world react? Obviously shock, but were there tangible consequences?
Profound shock, definitely. Many foreign intelligence agencies and analysts were caught off guard by the sheer speed and brutality. They'd largely assumed Kim Jong-Un would need Jang for years to manage the transition.
And China. They lost their main point of contact.
China was reportedly severely distressed, maybe even furious behind the scenes. They'd backed the wrong course, essentially. But politically, they were hamstrung. Their strategic priority is stability on their border, maintaining North Korea as a buffer state. So despite the humiliation, they couldn't really intervene. They just had to adapt to the new reality. And the U.S. The U.S. reaction was pretty straightforward. Frame it as proof of the regime's inherent, unchanging ruthlessness. More evidence that North Korea was unpredictable, dangerous, and needed to be contained. But the really critical takeaway here, from an analytical standpoint, is that Jang's purge wasn't an endpoint, was it? It was more like a beginning.
A devastating preamble. It fundamentally reset the rules of the game under Kim Jong-un. It ushered in a new era of arguably even more arbitrary, more brutal violence.
How so?
Well, after Jang's execution, we saw things escalate. The documented use of anti-aircraft guns to execute other high-ranking officials, particularly generals, seemed to become more frequent, a terrifying spectacle of power. We saw reports of more family members being purged, potentially even Kim Jong-un's own extended relatives who fell under suspicion.
The message being?
Absolute personal loyalty is the only thing that matters. All institutional power, all experience, all past service is secondary, even expendable. The leader had, as some analysts termed it, entered his Hitlerian path, consolidating power through extreme violence and the cult of personality. #tag outro. So when you step back and look at the whole story of Jang Song-Thaek, this calm, meticulous architect of power who stabilized a regime only to be utterly destroyed by it, it really stands as a profound, almost timeless lesson about autocratic systems.
What's the core takeaway?
It's that in governments where absolutely everything revolves around one individual, the biggest sin isn't incompetence. It's not even necessarily corruption. The truly unforgivable transgression is getting too close to power. It's demonstrating influence, capability, revealing, even implicitly, that the leader might not be indispensable.
Proximity itself becomes the crime.
Exactly. And the whole process we've discussed, the isolation, the public humiliation, the show trial, the brutal execution, the eradication of the network, it all served to hammer home one message to Pyongyang's elite and to the world. That in North Korea, under Kim Jong-un, nothing matters more than the leader's will. Not your decades of experience, not your age, not your institutional clout, not your economic control, not even your family ties to the founder. Nothing. All of it is secondary and potentially disposable compared to the immediate, often unpredictable desires of the leader. Jang Song-Thaek did the job he was supposed to do. He secured the foundation for the dynasty's continuation past that critical 2011 transition. He ensured Kim Jong-un inherited a state that wasn't collapsing.
And then he became the regime's largest, most politically necessary victim. He paid the ultimate price for his success.
The ultimate price.
And just to leave you, the listener, with one final chilling thought on this, there is that alleged, unconfirmed report about Jang's very last moments, dressed simply, just before the execution.
Right, the supposed final words. He's alleged to have said something profoundly ironic. For the country I saved, this is not a beautiful ending. Now, whether he actually said that or whether it was perhaps invented by his interrogators to highlight the fatal contradiction of his career, we'll probably never know for sure.
But sure or not, it perfectly captures the grim reality, doesn't it? The man who propped up the system became the ultimate sacrifice needed to preserve it under its new master. And that terrifying political logic, that ruthless calculus of power, continues to shape the destiny of millions in North Korea today.